You're listening to Superpowers of the Soul on the Superpower Up Podcast, the show that elevates superpowers to the divine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jennifer Urezzio, and this is Superpowers of the Soul, and I'm a superpower expert and founder of Soul Language. And we're talking with Laina or Orlando today, and we're talking about building self-esteem through self-awareness. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. This is very exciting.
I'm so excited that you're here. So I always like to ask the first question about what do you consider the superpower of your soul? But here's the additional part. For yourself. So what do you consider a superpower of your soul for yourself?
Love.
Ah, nice. That's a big one.
Yes.
I love that. And I love when people get those big things. They go, oh, it's so big, it's so cliche, and it's really not. So I always like, okay, so what's your kind of secret sauce for love? What is your vein in that big category of love?
Well, I had to understand that the love of my soul is an unconditional love, which is totally different than the love of my human side, my conditional loving that I got indoctrinated like everybody else to believe was love. So this kind of love is a love that is kind, that is compassionate, and that ultimately frees everybody to be itself.
Nice. So we also talk about sacred purpose, and again, sacred purpose is what you're profoundly here to experience, then offer that experience to others. It's not about doing. So what do you consider your sacred purpose?
My sacred purpose is to be an example of an ordinary person who came to experience an extraordinary awakening. And I'm here to show that if I can awaken and transform my life into one of purpose, my soul's purpose specifically to be the presence of unconditional love, then if I can do it, anybody can. So I'm just an example.
And I like that, this is the second time in less than 2 hours I've heard this, ordinary life, ordinary thing. And I'm starting to think like, what if extraordinary is the ordinary, right? What if that is what we are here to express and to be rather than what we think is ordinary? So stay tuned, everyone. There might be more about that. So what is a common theme that your soul has shared with you over your journey?
Throughout the entire journey, the common theme was to become aware of what blocks the truth of who I am, what blocks my soul from expressing and having that extraordinary life. And that is to look at my egoic belief system, to look at any thoughts that have been created by what I'm going to call humans on the planet, made up information that limits me, that confines me into a definition. And that has been the thing that I've had to focus on I've been on this journey for 17 years and I've been coaching now for 14 years. And it's the same thing, whether I'm looking at myself, I'm peeling layers. My soul is already whole and complete. I don't have to do anything to my soul except let it be what it is. And to let my soul be what it is and have that extraordinary life, I've got to look at all those old ordinary thought systems that I have been raised with. And that's the same thing that I do with my clients. Let's look at what you believe about yourself as was taught to you by others.
Yeah. And I love that wholeness and completeness. We talk a lot about that within the community about, my favorite question to ask myself is if I knew I was whole and complete, what would I be? What would I do? What would I say? And I think so often we're not coming from that whole and completeness. We're coming from separation.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit briefly, you gave us a little teaser there about how your soul supports others. Can you go a little more in detail for us?
Absolutely. I used to be a realtor. When I started this spiritual awakening, I was a real estate agent and I did extremely well. I loved my work. I loved my clients. But as I began to awaken, I began to hear guidance. My soul was guiding me into realizing that I was going to have to shift my career completely and I was going to become a life coach. And I was given specifically an awareness coach. Well, when I researched that, there were no awareness coaches, and life coaching, 12, 13 years ago was still relatively a new thing. So I didn't find a whole lot of information, but I persevered and I kept hearing the guidance that I would eventually be given everything that I needed to be given. And sure enough, into my awareness popped in a training organization for life coaching. So I did that certification and quickly realized that was teaching me the generalities of coaching, but my process in coaching was then being given to me. And I began to write these processes. And mind you, I was a realtor. I had no clue about spiritual awareness. I had, no clue about how to coach somebody else. But I was also a mom. I was a wife. I had sisters. I know how to talk to people. I was always a go-to person. So in many ways, I've been a life coach in training since I was a baby. But as I was being given the very specific processes that I was being taken through, then I realized that those were the processes I was supposed to help others go through. And it turned out to, it's been an amazing, the most fulfilling work that I've ever done is helping others do the same work that I had to go through. And that's really pretty much what I share.
Yeah. So I look forward to hearing more about that. But before we do a break here, let everyone know how to get in touch with you, how they can find more about you. Give out your website address.
Yes, it's LainaOrlando.com, and Laina is spelled LainaOrlando.com, Orlando like the city.
Beautiful. We'll be right back, everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Rekla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts, and we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. Because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter, we now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower quiz. And as Neva Lee Rekla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world.
Welcome back, everyone, to Superpowers of the Soul. We're talking about building self-esteem through self-awareness with Laina Orlando. So let's talk about a little bit what we mean by self-esteem and self-awareness, so everyone's on the same page. So what do you mean by those two kind of words?
To me, self-esteem is becoming aware of the self that we actually are. And to become aware of the self that we are, this is our soul essence, we have to become self-aware. We need to become aware that within us are two selves in essence. The self that is our human self, our conditioned self, what I call the little s self. And then we also have this higher self, this capital S self. This is our superpower self. Our soul. And that distinction needs to be very clear before somebody can actually become awakened, because to be awake is to choose between the two selves that you have become aware of. And the awakening process is making that choice to live only from the truth of who we are. This is our divine self. This is our eternal self that we are realizing is grander and vaster. And it's really, like you were saying earlier, it's that extraordinary aspect of ourselves that most of us are not familiar with.
Yeah. And when we know ourselves better, when we're more familiar with ourselves, how does it naturally build self-esteem?
Well, you gain a sense of confidence, and you begin to hear an intuitive knowingness inside of you that allows you to feel very certain about what you know. You also become very humble in that if you don't know something, you will say, I don't know that, because you're no longer defending what you know or don't know. You don't have to prove it. There is an ease about living your life because you realize you're not done. You're not finished. So there is no fears about right and wrong, because you realize that you're growing, you're expanding into more of your wholeness, which is kind of a paradox. You're whole and complete, But in our finite humanness, we only touch, in my experiences, we're barely scratching the surface of our potential. So we're just opening up to more of our truth. And that's why there's no fear of getting things right or wrong, because you're open to that intuition that is constantly course correcting you. And that allows you to be defenseless and gentle and trusting. It just, for me, it has made me be so much more grounded in the now moment, peaceful, able to listen so much more clearly than I ever did before. Then I can respond. It allows me also to be able to sit in silence with joy and enjoy the experience, because I trust that guidance is going to come up for me.
I love that. So if people want to start the self-awareness process, what can we offer them today to kind of jumpstart them into, even if they've been on the path for a while? There's always more self-awareness to kind of gain.
And that's a wonderful question. And the process actually is pretty simple. And that is to begin to listen to your thinking. Listen to what you say. And once we become really clear that we're always speaking out of two sides and two sides only. One side speaks of fear. It's about protection. It's judgmental. It is about what's wrong, what I need to get to feel better. The other side is the side of intuition. It's the side of love. It's the side that seeks to connect with others, to collaborate, to co-create. So one side is all about, what can I get out of this? It's a win-lose proposition. The other voice speaks of how can I contribute to this? How can it become a win-win proposition? But to be able to hear those two distinct voices within us, we have to be willing to get quiet and be paying attention. This is what the whole self-awareness process is. Let me become aware of which of myselves is speaking. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, because to listen to yourself, especially when you're being righteous, is very challenging, because the need to be right is the block to listen to how we're sabotaging ourselves. That's why we stay in repetitive patterns, because we are scared of being wrong about what we're thinking. And that makes it difficult to then listen to what you're saying or what you're thinking.
So they have some awareness. They're noticing how they're thinking. How can they move from that limiting structure of thinking to that more awareness, more in love, more of wholeness and completeness?
Well, I would say it has to start, first of all, with that awareness that I'm aware that there are two voices inside of me, and I want to hear what these two voices are saying. Then the next step, and this is also very challenging but very necessary, it's the process of acceptance. We have to accept that we have some ugly stuff inside of us. We have some judgments. We have some shame, some guilt. And that acceptance that we have made mistakes. And, people who've grown up with religious indoctrination also carry a lot of guilt, a lot of shame of being sinners or dirty or not measuring up. So we have to be very, very gentle with ourselves as we begin the process of accepting that we do have these two voices. You could call it the angel and the devil inside. But it really is the part that is our confidence, and then the part of us that feels insecure. The insecure side is always going to come from fear, the confident side, but we're not trained to listen to our confidence. Actually, as children, we're trained out of that. So there is going to be a process that we have to go through. Number one, that discomfort of knowing we have two voices, listening to the shameful and painful and judgmental side of ourselves. And then comes a very important process, which is to begin to forgive ourselves for what we were not aware of, because we're literally re-educating ourselves into aligning with our soul. That is not what we're trained to do when we're little. That's what we were trained out of. So there is a retraining, but it works best with gentleness and compassion for ourselves.
Beautiful. So before I ask my last question today, if there's one thing you want everyone to take away from this conversation, what would it be?
To be willing to enter into this self-inquiry, because truly what we are going to discover, what everybody has discovered, I've discovered about myself, I've seen it happen with my children, with the clients, thousands of clients that I've worked with over the last 12 years. What happens on the other side of this willingness to become self-aware is we literally come to know the best part of ourselves. It's almost as if this magnificent jewel, the crown jewel of who we are, is waiting inside of us, deep down inside, waiting for us to do the journey inside that allows us to give permission to our best self, our higher self, our soul self, our magnificence, to come forward. So what happens is we really come to fall in love with ourselves. And this changes everything, because then instead of continuing to be somebody who's looking for love and happiness and joy outside of ourselves, we find the well of that inside of ourselves, this unlimited, forever flowing well of joy, of love, of knowledge inside of ourselves. And that's what the promise of this journey leads us to, is realizing our own magnificent self.
Beautiful. Well said. So if you were a magnet on whatever you call your higher powers refrigerator, what would your magnet say?
It would just simply say, be love. Everything is either love or a call for love. So let yourself just be love.
Beautiful. So before we wrap up, tell everyone how to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Just go to lainaorlando.com or on Facebook, Laina Orlando Awareness Coach. They can find me there as well.
Beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Laina, for joining us today. If you like what you heard, you can connect with me and all the other experts in the Superpower Net at superpowerexperts.com/the net. Thanks a lot, and don't forget not just to find your connection, but be your connection.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower Quiz today.